wonder what's hot in the baking world right now? It's not even that complicated. You get store-bought croissants, cut them open, shove in some store-bought cookie dough, and that's it.
Hi everyone, I'm Gemma Stafford, professional chef, cookbook author, and creator of Bigger Bolder Baking. Welcome to Need to Know, your go-to podcast for everything baking entertainment. From the latest trends,
this is the viral scrambled pancake trend.
What? To the tips and tricks you crave.
We discovered that if you take apple peels, toss them in a little cinnamon and sugar, and bake them for about an hour in the oven, you get a really lovely treat.
Plus exclusive interviews with baking pros.
Hey, it's Liz from the Sugar Geek Show. Thanks for having me, Gemma.
We've even got the Bold Baking Hotline to answer all of your baking queries and questions.
Is a Dutch oven really necessary for baking bread, and what difference does it make?
Yes, I think we probably would agree on that, do we, Oni?
Yeah, good. So join us every Sunday for your new weekly baking ritual. It's everything you need to know.
This episode is brought to you by Board Bia's Spirit of Ireland program. Please visit irishfoodanddrink.com/Spirit of Ireland to learn more about the rich history and renaissance of Irish spirits.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni, I'm your host. Wow, we're celebrating 15 years on Heritage Radio Network. So it's that time of year, it's harvest season, and one of my favorite things in harvest season are wet hop beers. So a good friend of ours, long time in this world, hop farmer, gave me a call a couple weeks ago. So let's go around the room and I'll introduce everybody.
Hey, my name is John Kinsella. I'm a fourth-generation farmer from Eastern Long Island. Been growing hops for about 10 or 12 years now, and excited to be here today.
I'm Adam Kreider from the Hop Growers of New York Association. I'm the executive director.
Hi, I'm Megan Wilson. I'm the COO of Torch and Crown Brewing Company in Manhattan.
Well, John, it's great to catch up with you. I mean, I don't know, it was 10 or 12 years ago you reached out and you said, I'm a new farmer, but I'm starting to grow hops in New York, and I'm trying to raise money to get what?
Yep, a German hop harvesting machine. I learned quickly that hops were a great crop to grow on the farm here in New York, and also learned equally as quickly that picking them by hand is very prohibitive. We had a couple parties where we invited people to come and help us pick, and pretty soon those same good friends weren't answering the phone anymore. So I realized I needed this machine and did a Kickstarter campaign, and we were able to raise the money, and Jimmy was a big help on that initiative, so very appreciative. And we've been growing hops ever since, along with the other berries and different crops we grow. And we're excited this year to be expanding the hop operation a little bit, adding some acreage, and excited about the hop harvest season, the wet hop season.
Well, it's one of my favorite styles of beer. When I think about if we're in America, what would be my September, October beer? It would be wet hop. When you first started, everything was different. 10 years ago, craft beer was just changing. Craft beverage laws came into effect with the former governor, and everybody was all like gung-ho and thumbs up. And suddenly there were a lot of farmers growing hops. So what's changed? Because it was like everyone was new. People were talking about sharing harvesting machines and learning techniques, but then it just didn't quite happen the way everyone thought, right?
Yeah, it's been quite the evolution over the last 10 years. It's a good point, Jimmy. Back then when hops were first starting to being grown again in the state, one thing to remember is that 100 years ago, New York State produced the majority of hops grown in America. Since then, a lot has changed, but that revival that happened about 10 years ago created an immense amount of excitement in farming community, the brewing community, the gardening community, and you had a lot of people starting to grow hops, which was a good thing. What's happened since then, Jimmy, is, hops, like any crop, it's a difficult thing to grow, and it's certainly an even harder thing to master consistently. So that number of initial growers back then has since dwindled for various reasons. People got into it maybe without fully knowing what they were signing up for in a lifestyle of farming, and raising a crop and being exposed to the Mother Nature and the weather of the seasons. So right now in the state, we're down to a little over a dozen growers or so that are professional farmers, very serious, too stubborn to quit, going to stick around till they make it work type of people. And it's starting to work, and it's starting to create some excitement at different levels. And that's why we wanted to come and talk to you today.
John, you're on Long Island. Do you spend more time on the beach or out in the fields? Because you got a good suntan.
Well, unfortunately, it's out in the fields,
I didn't know how to bring that up. I was like, he looks like a farmer, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I enjoy the outdoor lifestyle and not kind of being cooped up inside. But yeah, we're out there on the farm every day, raising the different crops and working the land. And we do try to sneak down to the beach in the evenings after, the farming day is done to enjoy, the beautiful waters of Long Island.
And then just to refresh my memory, what are the challenges of growing hops? And is it harder being smaller than bigger?
That's a good question. It is a specialty crop, so it really takes each variety of hop. You almost have to learn that variety intimately on its own and treat each variety differently. So that's been a challenge that's similar to any specialty crop. It's not like growing tomatoes, say, where if you have a bad season, you disc it under and you plant a new seed next year. Our hops are always in the ground. They're perennials, so we need to take care of them from year to year and have a much bigger picture thought process on how we're cultivating them from season to season. So that's been a challenge. And being small certainly has its advantages, but there are also disadvantages. Hop farming is one that tends to require a fair amount of specialized equipment. So you need to invest pretty heavily in the capital requirements in equipment and buildings to be able to handle the hop, to be able to harvest it effectively in a very specific time frame, a pick window, to be able to process it, bale it, store it, and make sure that quality is preserved in every step of the process. That's what the main focus is now with all the growers in the state. So it's good to be small, and other days it's good to be big, I guess. And
Adam, tell us about your background, because you're kind of the next step for the hop growers in New York. You've got quite a background in hops and the industry.
Yeah, so I started with hops in 2014. I started with an export business, primarily U.S. hops to Italy. About the time I started to expand throughout Europe, transitioned my portfolio over to Crosby Hop Farm and help manage their international portfolio.
So that's a big
Crosby Hop Farm. Yeah, they now Crosby Hops is a vertically integrated grower, producer, distributor, broker. Big focus on quality
internationally,
domestically, and then throughout the time of that, just in the sales process, learned a lot about the different industries all over the world. From Germany, I was, one of the few people that sold on alpha, like kilograms alpha, which is, for people that don't know, like kilograms alpha, it's basically extract, and learning how alpha markets, which is your big beer extract that goes into, bigger beer like AB InBev beers and stuff like that, how that affects and impacts the aroma market. Just got an absolute, master's level education in hop supply chain and what makes it effective, and the different cycles that the hop industry goes through. And then after around the pandemic, was laid off there and ended up working on the other side for Virgil Gamache Farms, who owns the hop called Amarillo, still one of the largest grown proprietary hops in the world today, and got a very good understanding of proprietary management, which is its own beast. And then honestly tried to get out of the industry for a while and ended up in New York City after living in California for 10 years. And the hop growers in New York found out I was a free agent and, rolled their dice with making me executive director. So I don't know how that's working out, but I'm here.
Well, you never think of someone running a New York farm organization with quite the international experience that you have. So we're looking forward to more of this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you,
and
Jimmy.
Megan, tell us about you. Because you're nodding everything Adam said, you were nodding, and I'm like, oh my God, she knows everything.
Well, I've heard his story, certainly, a little bit from when he approached me about doing the festival in Union Square. But in terms of
what festival?
The Wet Hop Festival.
What, I don't know. about that. Tell me about it.
Well, I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to tell you about it, but I know that they've been operating the Wet Hop Festival for New York State for the Hop Growers Association. I don't even know if I'm saying the name right. Is that right? Great.
Yeah.
The Hop Growers Association. But they've done it upstate previously, and there hasn't been quite as much penetration into New York City. But obviously, it's such a key component of the state, and so much of the infrastructure and economy of the state, resides in New York City. So trying to bring and integrate some of the farming elements and bring it closer to, the concentration of breweries that we have in New York City that are continuing to grow and expand. And basically, since you got into the growing industry, it's really been a big growth of brewery production in New York City. So trying to find an opportunity to really showcase the ingredients and, the hops grown in New York State in the city and finding a showcase for that. So that's when Adam approached me about putting on one of the Hop Grower Guild Wet Hop Festivals in Union Square in our seasonal location in the pavilion there.
Wow, that's amazing having a beer festival in Union Square. So what's your job at Torch and Crown? You've got she's wearing a cool t-shirt.
I am.
Torch and Crown. It makes me think of the Olympics in Paris. It's
a little bit. Yeah, no.
Got a torch and colors.
Yeah. Well, Torch and Crown and, just even going to the name is inspired by the Statue of Liberty. So it's very ingrained in New York City. And that was always the intention from when John and Joe first conceived of the idea back, when they were in high school brewing beer when they shouldn't be.
And we had Joe and Joan on several years ago, Torch and Crown, when they were just about to open a Manhattan location. You're in the Bronx at the brewing facility. You're overseeing this festival in Union Square, Manhattan. There's also like the hospitality at downtown Van Dam location.
Yes. So general background, I've been in operations my entire career, but before coming into the beer industry, I was working in finance, and I actually worked on an operation desk that supported the trading desk that John Dantzler is one of the co-founders of Torch and Crown worked on. So we worked together in our first jobs out of college over a decade plus ago at this point. And that's how, I got to know how working with him was. And, we worked really well together. But also, even back then, over a decade ago, he was saying, I'm going to open a brewery in New York City. I was like, that's nice, John. Sure. And then several years later, 5 years later or something, he's like, I opened that brewery in New York City. Do you want to come and join on and run the operations with me? So I made that leap back in October 2018 when we were just about to launch the brand. So we first released the beer January 2019 and then opened our Soho location on Van Dam that you mentioned in October 2020. Super fun time, pandemic era. So that was certainly an adventure, just, kind of surviving the pandemic, especially when, we didn't really have a direct-to-consumer way, of reaching customers until that location opened. So up until that point, I was kind of overseeing the production facility that we had in the Bronx and also helping to launch the Soho location to a certain extent. And then earlier last year, when we were first looking to open our Union Square location, last summer was our first season there. That's when I came more involved in the hospitality side as well. So both of those kind of roll up.
Well, John, this is a nice intro to the guests and everything. Well, let's start talking what wet hops are. Years ago, I remember everyone heard about it. What should be the great beer of fall? I used to call them fresh hops. 15 years ago, there were only a few breweries in the country that you could get their fresh hop from in New York City, and no one was growing hops in New York. So what is a wet hop beer, a fresh hop beer? Why do you call it that, too? Why don't you just call it fresh hops?
Yeah, I think that's a great point you bring up, Jimmy. Sometimes wet hop and fresh hop are used interchangeably, but they do mean two separately distinct things. A wet hop is a beer that's made with hops that are picked that day and sent right to the brewery immediately. Oftentimes, the hops are still hanging up in the hop yard while the brewer's mashing in early that morning. They're typically rushed to the brewery just in time to be added in the process to make a truly seasonal beer. It's one of the only beers, that's actually seasonal, where it's the there's a specific distinction of time and place when you make a wet hop beer. And the idea is to encapsulate, that hop as it is naturally out in the hop yard. Other hops the majority of hops are dried to be able to preserve them for a longer period of time. So when the term fresh hop is used, that's a freshly dried hop. So it's the most fresh hop that you can get that has gone through the full process of being dried. And they both make great beers. They're both, a celebration of time and place. Wet hop beers first came to prominence, I believe, in the 80s by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, started brewing wet hop beers and kind of initiated a whole category of beer, of seasonal beer.
Well, that's so, you're working on a festival and everyone's going to make, wet hop beers, not just fresh. So what's the turnaround? So it's harvest season. We're talking about harvest. You go out, you harvesting the hops. Do you have to handle them at all before you send them to the brewer? Why don't Adam and Megan tell us about how you guys are going to make your wet hop, or what you guys are doing to coordinate that for the festival? Because it must be perishable.
Yeah,
you're probably trying to get it into how many different breweries' hands. It's quite amazing.
One of the interesting things about wet hop beers is there's only about 5 real hop growing states in the country, and New York happens to be one of them. So in order to make a wet hop or a fresh hop, you really need to be in close proximity to those hop farms that are growing the hops. And that's one of the things that's special about New York is that, we have this vibrant hop growing community. And we also have a lot of breweries in the state who are interested in using those ingredients. So it's a special time, and they're basically just picked right off the vine, run through the harvester and sent to the brewery. So there's not a lot of handling of the hops.
Yeah. I mean, as executive director of the Hop Growers of New York Association, the first thing that I wanted to address was gaps in the supply chain here in New York, primarily between farms and distributors, farms and brewers, and this proximity and this ability to celebrate the ingredients that are next door that no one really knew about. And part of that, the inspiration for coming to New York City with it was that in our inaugural year last year, a majority of the brewers were from New York City, yet the majority of the hop farms are in upstate New York. John really being the exception. Shout out to KCBC Brewing for recommending that we reach out to Torch and Crown and getting us in connection with them to really put it at the forefront. It's such a beautiful location. And so this celebration of ingredients in the Pacific Northwest and the proximity of this somewhat mandala-like aspect of brewing, that it's here today and gone tomorrow, is something that is absolutely huge in the West Coast that I fell in love with working for breweries out there. And I was first put in contact with New York hops when I was working for Virgil Gamache Farms through work with a private business called the Hop Guild. And I was really impressed by, the quality of some of the stuff coming out. And the best way to get brewers involved and put some stimulus into the market was to celebrate the ingredients themselves, which I just really don't see a lot happening in specialty crops to begin with. What we have in brewing is we have an amazing community. We have a lot of celebration, a lot of smiling and laughing and beauty that comes with it. And so I thought this would be a great way to activate the brewing industry in general, just at a time where I think everyone's trying to figure out, they're saying that the industry is maturing and everyone's trying to figure out new angles. And we've created quite the hype with that. And a lot of people wanting to push themselves in a brewing capacity. There's many ways you can do wet hop beers. You could freeze them and shatter them before you put them in. You could, I don't know if anyone knows what a randle is out there, but you could randle them.
What's a randle?
A randle's like a little mini torpedo-esque thing that you rack beers into and throw hops in the middle and rack them right off of wet hops. You could dry hop with them. You can put them in the boil. You can mix them with fresh hops. There's a ton of brewing challenge with it. And I think that we've been successful in starting some initial hype. And, this is extending now to being a statewide festival where we're also trying to bridge the gap of some sort of isolation dynamics where upstate brewers don't necessarily know the premier brands of New York City brewers and downstate brewers and vice versa. And so we're doing our best to connect the industry through through celebration of ingredients and farmers and brewers that really care and really want to push the envelope together.
Oh, that's a great intro again. Megan, so you're at Torch and Crown. So what are the steps for you guys to get the wet hops and make beer for this festival?
Sure. This was actually our first ever wet hop beer that we've brewed at Torch and Crown. And a really key component of that was Adam sharing the resources of what farms that we could reach out to, what types of hops that they had available, what were the general pick windows, contact information, so we could reach out and connect directly with the farmers, understand when we needed to be there to get the hop that we wanted. And it was all about like taking that piece of the puzzle out of us having to make that connection or find how to connect with the farmers in the state, especially to Adam's point that so many of them aren't in our area, or at least not the immediate area. That made it so much easier for us to say yes. And then obviously, since we were planning and had already agreed to host the festival, we needed to commit to making this wet hop beer. Yeah, so we just sent over those contacts that Adam provided our production team, and they ended up deciding to work with some Mackinac hop from Cobblestone Farms up in Rochester. So Joe was the one who committed, made the 5-hour drive each way, grab those hops, bring them back so we could mash them in. We ended up just kind of throwing them in some bags and throwing them in the kettle was the way we did it. But yeah, no, it was smelling great. It was a hop we had never worked with. We had never worked with Cobblestone before. So it was just making new connections, trying new things, both in terms of the process, but also the ingredient too. It was just a really fun way to kind of experience the process and do something, because our brewers have always really loved those styles of beer. So brewers always love to brew the beers that they love to drink, you know? So that was a fun part of the process too.
Cheers to the Wet Hop Fest. Again, when are they and where are the locations?
So we're starting out at Torch and Crown in Union Square on September 22nd. It's Sunday from 2 to 7 p.m.
So in Manhattan.
In Manhattan.
New York City.
Yeah, Manhattan, New York City. And then we're heading out on 6 days from that, September 28th at the tail end of Western New York Beer Week in Buffalo at Rusty Nickel Brewing from, I believe, 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. And then each of those festivals will feature beers both, mixed from the area and not from the area. And then the kind of grand finale and where we're going to present the prize of a People's Choice competition will be October 5th at Indian Ladder Farms, which is in the greater Albany area. And that will be from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. So get ready for that one.
Years ago, we had Dieter and his wife on when they wrote the East Coast Hop Handbook that was the first book about growing hops in the East. Quite amazing. Now, John, we're drinking beer. So you picked out some beers because there's hops. Some of them you grew. So what was the first beer we had?
Yep. The first one we had was a Mexican style lager from Night Glow Brewery.
Which is not too far from here. We're
not
at
too
Roberta's
far.
Pizza in Bushwick.
Yeah. Stopped off on the way over. And it has a New York grown Hallertau hops. And also has New York grown Pilsner.
Do you know
flake corn.
Who grew those hops, Adam?
The Hallertau would have been Crooked Creek or Peterson Hop Farms, I believe. Both of those people can get mad at me if I didn't cite that correctly.
Well, you're not used to hearing the name of the hop farm.
Not at
so
all.
that's pretty cool.
Not at all.
And then is that the beer we're drinking now?
That's the one we have now.
I love it. We think we sucked that down. We got to have some more.
Yeah, it's very thirst quenching.
Yeah, John, save some for us. Buddy.
Yeah, and every time we have a beer, John's going to tell us. So back to Megan. So you're getting these hops for this. So what's the timeline? I mean, Joe has to go pick these up. Does he have to keep them refrigerated? Special handling. I mean, is it like cream for from a cow? Or
I think that is what makes this festival the hardest festival that I've ever thrown, and that is the fact that it's not just like a beer festival where you're like, hey, we're all gonna have a fun time and like bring your beers down. We got to figure out who's gonna buy the hops. We got to figure out who says they're gonna buy a hops is gonna drop out. We got to figure out who said they aren't and who's gonna join in. And then by the time they get it, we have to arrange those beers, their delivery, the logistics, all within essentially a 3-week window. So I haven't been sleeping for a while because of that, but no, it's just a joke. But
he looks a little wired, doesn't he?
I'm a little wired.
Yeah, he needs another beer.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what makes this really challenging, but also brings the novelty to the consumer. And we also this year we have an expanded portfolio of ciders that are going to be featured as well
with wet hops.
With wet hops, yeah, and we're continuing to work on the supply chain into the cider industry as well, with the help of Scott Ramsey of the New York Cider Association.
Wow, that's great. So Megan, for you guys again, Joe goes up and gets the hops.
Yeah.
What are the steps? And then what style of beer are most people making with a wet hop? Is there like a wet hop style, or is it a freestyle?
At least for us, I think it was a freestyle. We just decided to do a pale ale. But yeah, Joe drove up, made the 5-hour drive, 5-hour drive back, and we threw him directly into some bags and steeped it in the kettle, brewed same day.
So it's like is it 24-hour window, Adam? I mean,
yeah, just it depends how each brewery treats it. There's a lot of ways to do it. I believe, in this case, you all got it, brought it back, threw it in, from what I understand. General styles seem to be, they're brewers' beers, so it's pale ales, IPAs.
There's a window that's like 24 hours, 48 hours. Can you sit on these wet hops for a week?
I think it's kind of same day. I mean, same day is what you're really looking for to preserve that freshness and the essence of what is out in the hop yard.
So then also when you're harvesting hops and you're going to dry them, is it the same window that you want to dry them that same day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, 100%.
So it is. It's it's perishable, right?
Yeah, and we call it the Wet Hop Fest in terms of people that there's only a certain amount of wet hops that each farm is going to be able to have a window to produce. So the wet hop beers that you'll see in the festival are incredibly special because these brewers have gone and the growers have gone to extra lengths to provide those. Once it gets into a baled form and it's dried and we're calling it fresh hops, there's a little bit more of a leniency in terms of as long as it's stored cold and it's not yet processed into T90 pellets, which is basically a pellet that most beers are made with. There's a little bit more of forgiveness of how it can be used. And essentially, there are a lot of Pacific Northwest hop brokers that sell wet hops into New York as well and other places, but their shipping's a lot of money. The carbon footprint's high, and ultimately a lot of them show up with some browning and some deterioration. And here you're getting, what I like to call, especially a Torch and Crown, because it's gonna be the first one, like absolutely the freshest of the fresh that you can get, and some straight up banging hops right out of our backyard.
So Megan, you guys are making a wet hop beer, a pale ale. Mm-hmm. So from the time of the steep and the brew process, just guide us through that, and then when is it going to be in the glass?
Sure. Yeah, we're in terms of both freshest of the fresh, it'll be in terms of the hops that we put in hot side in the kettle, but then also I think we are literally scheduled to package this the Friday before the festival that we're hosting on Sunday. So that's going to be a fresh packaged beer too. So that'll be really nice. But yeah, no, we're also planning to, dry hop it, use some more traditional pellets in the product too to finish out. So we'll probably dry hop it this week and then we'll package it, Friday before the festival. So
it's
like
amazing.
The 20th or something.
You know what? When I think of a wet hop beer, I think of a pale ale. I think of something that the hop can shine in. It is that typical that what most people are doing, Adam?
From the responses so far, yes. But there's also the aspect of just making damn fine, clean beer. Some people are making some really interesting Kolsch's, and people that were able to get their purchases a little bit earlier from some earlier pick hops where they're able to lager it a bit longer, get their 6-week lagers in. So we're gonna have a good smattering of a bunch of different styles. My favorite style last year was Cascadian Dark Ale, which is essentially a black IPA that absolutely just Indian Ladder Farm made it. They're making it again this year, I believe, with Wayward Lane Brewing.
We love those guys, Indian Ladder Farm.
Yeah, and it's that beer just blew my mind. But that's, I don't know, I guess I have a CDA problem.
What's CDA?
Cascadian Dark Ale.
You have to get them to send some of that down to our festival.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Believe me. I mean, if anyone from upstate doesn't want to come and party in Union Square, Manhattan, what a gorgeous location you all have. Hopefully we can do it next year, so you got another chance.
Megan, it's quite amazing. Actually, when I started in the industry in the 90s, the restaurant I worked for in Union Square put in that first restaurant in the square there. It was called Luna Park. So maybe that's why you have the pizza oven.
Yeah.
But for you guys, so organizing the festival. So as the host, are you also organizing the festival components?
We're working closely with Adam on that front for sure, because there's pieces of who we are that we want to bring to it. We had, talked about doing pizzas, a lot of our pizzas and a lot of our food that we serve uses local ingredients, but really try and focus in on that to mirror the beers and, how, the local ingredients that are involved there as well. But yeah, we want it to be a celebration, as a whole of produce and, the various agriculture in New York State. And that kind of obviously starts, with the hops that go into the beer and the components that we use to produce that. But it's beyond that. It's like the food we eat and all of that. So.
Which breweries will be at the Manhattan event?
We're still selecting those. Where I'm still getting the selection of all the registrations of the beer to curate it appropriately. I'm working very close. Claire and Chris from Torch and Crown have been absolutely amazing in helping facilitate this process. We'll have music there. We're going to actually have a hop showcase with some of the hops that are actually in the beer for people to experience and rub. And also hopefully some of the experimental varieties that we're working on in the state with the breeding programs that are out there in New York State, both private and public. And we're also going to have some time with growers to have a grower panel discussion and brewers to have a brewer panel. One of the best parts of this festival is actually also for the brewers, because we're not going to be running off of jockey boxes that I know of. And so the brewers can have a forum and talk to each other and really experiment and have community around what they're doing and learning from each other, rather than having it be, let's throw some brewers behind a jockey box and laugh at them until they're out, sort of deal, or whatever we're going to do. But I like that we're trying to make these. We're doing our utmost, especially in this case with Chris and Claire, to make an interactive event that's educational as well.
No, it's really special. I was just at a really great festival in June at Three's, the Pills and Love, and the same kind of a lot of industry people, probably 50 different breweries represented, and probably half of them had either the brewer or a primary person there. I think it takes it back to what beer is, where there's a big community.
Hey, everybody. I'm Greg Benson.
I'm Souther Teague.
And this is Damon Bolte from The Speakeasy. And we're excited to share our latest episode with you, especially if you're passionate about the craft and culture of Irish spirits. This week, we had the pleasure of exploring the dynamic world of Irish spirits with three exceptional guests.
Yeah, Andy Ferreira from Cask joined us to discuss the evolution of the modern Irish on-premise and mixology scene. We also spoke with Tim Herlihy about the success of Lost Irish here in the United States. And finally, Dara Flanagan from Board Bia gave us some fascinating insights into what lies ahead for Irish spirits in the United States.
Exactly. So if you are curious about the heritage and future of Irish spirits, this episode is for you. And to deepen your understanding, we totally recommend exploring the Spirit of Ireland program. It's really cool. It's a comprehensive look at the rich history and renaissance of Irish spirits, featuring interviews with master distillers, barrel coopers, and a lot more. It even offers a sensory journey through the barley fields and barrel houses of Ireland, which is super cool.
Totally. So for those who want to dive deeper into the world of Irish spirits after listening to our latest episode, the Spirit of Ireland program offers an educational journey that goes way beyond the glass, taking you into the heart of Irish spirit making with stories, traditions, and a lot of innovations. Please visit irishfoodanddrink.com/Spirit of Ireland to learn more and find our latest episode wherever you listen to your podcasts.
John, you got your wet hops, and I'm a brewer enthusiast. I'm at this event. How do people touch the hops? I've seen brewers like rub them and smell them.
That's a good question, Jamie. The best way to really understand, the aroma and what a different hop variety can provide is by doing what they would call a rub. So basically, you're going to pick up that hop and, in between your fingers, you're going to kind of smash it up a little bit. And what that's going to do is it releases the aroma, because all the aroma and all the valuable brewing compounds of a hop are in what's called lupulin, which is a yellow substance. It's basically the pollen of the hop flower. And that's what you want to release by smashing it with your fingers and kind of breaking the hop open. By smashing it, what you're doing is you're breaking those little glands that then release all the different oils and compounds of a hop. And that's how you get the best sense of, what that would lend itself to in a beer. So it's pretty fun, for anyone that's either an enthusiast of beer, a home brewer, professional brewer, hop farmer, anyone, just to go through that process and kind of, you think maybe a hop's a hop, but it's the furthest thing from the truth. Each one can really lend different things. Some are more tropical fruit forward, some are more citrusy, grapefruit, piney, resiny. There's many different hop profiles that can come about.
Megan, since again you're working on the festival, do you have any anxiety about this or some issue that's pending, or you're just completely enthusiastic? I'm sure. Is there like a checklist in your mind that you're going through, or?
I think Adam came in with a really strong vision and was really open to working with us, in any way, that worked well for us. So really no anxiety here,
you
just
don't have
excitement.
Anxiety,
No. I mean,
cool.
Sure. But not about this really. But one thing, that I just want to highlight that I love about the idea of bringing the hops there so people can experience that is, when you drink a wine, there's an agricultural component. Everyone knows, the grapes were grown at that vineyard or whatever. But it felt more a step or two removed when you're at a brewery. You don't necessarily fully appreciate the agricultural component and how the various flavors and how the brewers selected that and worked with the farmers in some cases to be like, this is what we want to put forward for the product. And bringing that so people can really experience that and get an understanding for themselves. That certainly was something for me coming into the industry that was really eye-opening. So anytime we can kind of introduce that to people outside of the industry, but that are interested in beer, I think it's a really great window into both beer production and how it's made, but the agricultural components behind it.
So at the festival also, even though they're wet hops, different breweries are working with different varieties of hops, right? So, John, the second beer, which is completely different than the first.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying this one. This is another beer from Night Glow. It's a New York cold IPA, and it is brewed with New York Columbus, which are from my farm, Jimmy.
Conzella.
Yep, that's right. And
you have to say that a few times.
It's also
what's your farm?
Conzella Farm.
And where is it?
It's in Wading River on the North Fork of Long Island. It's also brewed with Vista from Crooked Creek Farm. That's in upstate New York. And it's the third hop in it, which I think gives it that complexity that we're tasting right now, is it's brewed with Rakow, which is from Weathertop Farm up near Rochester.
I'll have a top off.
3 different hop farms contributed to this beer here.
That's pretty unique. Are they listing the hops on the can?
Yes.
They are, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Johnny over at Night Glow does a great job supporting local agriculture and has a great vision. Has also been an absolute monster in diving headfirst into this festival and finding any point of innovation possible, I think. So shout out to Night Glow. Let's go.
So they're fairly new.
In New York State, they're fairly new. I believe that they've been established in Chicago and use local ingredients from Michigan there. And they actually are opening up, if not already open, in LA, where they'll also be using local hops and ingredients from California.
So it's a new model.
Hopefully I did a good one on that, Johnny.
But they're not too far. So they're in this area, Bushwick, Jefferson Stop area.
Yeah,
right?
5 minutes away.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's nice that you grew one of these hops. So the hop that you grew, you got a story of it? Do you remember this hop?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. It's called Columbus. It's a strong grower, and it's a very, you don't need to use a lot of it when you brew because it's very, very strong, has a real dank, resiny kind of aroma that comes forward, and it plays well with other hops, which is one thing that's nice about this beer. We have 3 kind of totally different hops in it, but together, it's really comes together nicely.
If you're getting that like grapefruit pith note, that's the Columbus.
Megan, do you take tasting notes? Are you that?
I definitely got involved in it when I was kind of overseeing the production side. I would make a point of participating with the brew team and do tasting notes. Because I feel like a lot of people when they first start are a little hesitant. They don't want to speak up. Everybody has an opinion. They have a viewpoint. They just need to continue to participate, and you'll start to pick out those notes if you think about it.
Adam, you mentioned specialty crops, New York State. I know from dealing with craft malts that New York at Cornell, that they for many years they worked on a New York appropriate barley that was geared towards beer and spirits. And John, when we were chatting on the way in, you mentioned Cornell and hops. Now, I remember also 10, 12 years ago, there was a small hop program that Cornell was running, which was encouraging small farmers to grow hops. That's where I last talked about this.
Yep. So that program was at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Madison County. They took it up to, Madison County was one of the major growing regions of New York over 100 years ago. It's where the first New York hops were grown. So it's kind of a special place for hop history.
Where's that near?
Madison County. It's
is that Cooperstown or not?
It's a little west of Cooperstown. It's in between Syracuse and Albany. Basically in between Syracuse and Albany on Route 20, you had what they called the New York Hop Belt. So 20 miles north and south of that road was where a lot of hops were grown.
And then it became dairy. And then it became nothing.
A lot of people don't know that before dairy in New York, there were hops. A lot of those early long-standing dairy farms started off
we used to go up to
farms.
A festival in Cooperstown at Omegang, and we'd drive from Albany west on 20, and you could just see, wow, it was something. But even the stoplights, there'd be like a gas station and a closed store.
Yep. So we always wanted, to the hop farmers in the state, when we banded together to form Hop Growers of New York Association, which was a 501c6 not-for-profit organization, to expand and increase the amount of hops grown in the state, to promote it to the breweries and really make it a viable specialty crop in our state. One of the key components that we wanted to do, the farmers, was leverage our history. So what you had, Jimmy, were all these wild hops, we call them heritage hops in the state here, left over from the heyday 100 years ago. They might be growing alongside the canal or the railroad tracks or in a hedgerow. So we made an effort to collect those hops all across the state, and it came to over 30 different samples. And we cataloged them. We sent them out for genetic analysis to find out their histories. And this was all the precursor to the other initiative that Hop Growers of New York took on, was to initiate a hop breeding program at Cornell University. And we were successful in getting that started a few years back. It's stationed at Cornell Agritech in Geneva, New York. And right now there's some amazing people up there working on developing a uniquely New York hop. So a hop that will grow well in our climate and also be attractive to the vibrant brewing industry that we have here in the state. So it's pretty unique. We're getting, the breweries involved from a sensory, perspective to give us their feedback. The farmers in the state are involved in the program to give feedback on the agronomics and how well the different ones grow in the different growing regions around the state. And in the near future here, we'll have a hop that is, a New York hop that will be a good hop to grow and something super exciting to bring into the brewing industry here.
And Adam, all the work that you've done in other places, you must have a vision for New York. Since we have the history here, it always comes up. You're like, New York was the great hop growing state. You spend time in Cooperstown, you go to the Farmers Museum, and they still have a hop yard.
Yes, as fate has it, or the fates have it, that vision is actually happening right now, because the national and international hop industry has pulled, I think the latest report is somewhere around 65%, an aggregate 65% of all of the total crop in the United States. They're in a readjustment period where there is way more supply than demand.
That's amazing.
However, in New York State, we are in an inverse market where we cannot grow enough for the demand. We've done some outreach out west. We share a lot in common with Oregon in terms of having to prevent against downy mildew with, a more humid climate. We've sought help and advocacy and consultation from some of the best farms in Oregon. And I'm using every connection I can to help engage the industry to really help us build a supply chain. And ultimately, the first stage in this is that I believe we have a 3 to 5 year window right now that is going to go away if we don't take advantage of it, that we can readjust New York and create what is truly an estate level program where we can grow 3 to 7 varieties and be absolutely wonderful at it and be a complement to the other industry in New York rather than worrying ourselves about disruption. So I think that there's a beautiful synergy with and a beautiful opportunity here for New York State. And the more that the breweries and the farms and the consumers meld together, the better chance we have to do something really special and to build upon that after that 5 year.
This festival is a great idea. I mean, it's everything about we're talking about harvest on the network this month. And when you do think about New York, one of the greatest harvest to glass stories is this Wet Hop Festival. John, again, farmer, longtime family farm on Long Island. How big will you get as a hop farmer? Because you've got a lot of other crops there. Like how big is your farm? How many acres are dedicated to the hops? And because it's in my mind, you're the hop guy. But you're also you have tomatoes.
Right. So when my great-grandfather started the farm, one of the biggest things, he immigrated from Poland, and one of the biggest things long-standing on the farm all those generations has been strawberries. So we grow a lot of strawberries. We grow blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, and asparagus. And then my kind of contribution to the farm, a little over 10 years ago was what could I grow that's different, that my neighbors aren't growing, that's unique, that I think could be successful as a specialty crop. And, I landed on hops. So back then, Jimmy, when we first met, 10 years ago, the farm was just under 20 acres in size. Recently, we underwent a land preservation project that a couple neighboring landowners got involved with. And we're now, through a lot of effort and a lot of hard work, in a few years' time, we're up to 40 acres, and we're what you call a forever farm. So the land cannot be used for anything other than farming in perpetuity. So we have, newly kind of doubled the size of our farm. So we're excited about expanding our hop yard and excited what the future can bring and what we're talking about here today. The Wet Hop Festivals, integrating the supply chain. And, I'm going to be planting a couple more acres next spring. And we'll, hopefully continue to add on a little bit each year.
I think one of the key dynamics here in terms of supply chain and how this works with the Wet Hop Festival was that when I arrived here in New York State, probably the core of the issue here is that there is little to no forward contracting in the state. So the farmers are 100% planting on spec. This was the primary goal of this festival, was to help the growers engage the brewing community and be able to sell their crop directly so that they no longer were risking 100% speculation and growing. John, if I can share the metric, John on 2 acres of hops this year has sold 98% of his entire crop into the Wet Hop Festival. He has 100 pounds left over of hops. So he can now securely go into the market, plant another 2 acres, start to experiment, engage brewers, distributors alike, and not have to plant on spec anymore. And we're seeing that somewhere between 50 or 100% or more hops from each farm, even if they have sold wet hops before, have been engaged this year in 2024 over this festival. So even before we step into the arena and celebrate this with everybody, on the farm to brewer level, it's already been massively successful. And so that's my plug for y'all to come out and celebrate with us.
And then, last thing, so the contract, so places you've worked, like out west, bigger organizations. I'm a regional brewer and I want certain hops from Idaho, whatever. What is the contract? What's typical?
There's been, in the United States, when I started in the industry, it was a 1 to 3 year contract. That's gotten a little bit more flexible over the years because of oversupply and because of changing dynamics in the brewer. Basically, let's just call them variety wars, where this year this variety works and next year it doesn't. There's been a lot of adjustment through the industry with that on a high level, just to talk about it that way. But the key point is that I don't think there's any major league hop farmer that would tell you that they are planting anything over 25% on speculation.
When does the contracting start? So like the same for John, if he wants to have some contracted hops, when would someone contract with him?
That's a very good question.
When does he get paid?
The farms, so in a perfect world.
Like I know at a CSA, you go in and you pre-order your summer vegetables and you pick them up all summer.
In the perfect world that we all know does not exist, John would have, or any farmer would have those contracted before they buy the plant material, which would be in May of the previous year. In Oregon and New York, we're talking about a 2-year turnaround to a full commercial yield. In Yakima, Washington, because it's essentially an irrigated desert, they can do it in 1. So this is where, especially in the New York scheme, because we are looking at this estate model and we are looking at smaller farms scaling with this estate model, you could contract in New York. I mean, John, tell me if I'm wrong. You take a contract for 100 pounds.
Yeah, 100%.
In out west, generally speaking, especially talking to a grower direct, you need to add at least 2 zeros to that. So
10,000 pounds
for a farm to plant acres for you.
Right, 100, 1,000, 10,000.
Yeah,
2 zeros.
Right? Yeah. Sorry, going too quick with my math. It's all the Dayglow coffee I had before this. Another plug for you, Johnny.
Is it Dayglow Coffee and Nightglow Brewery?
My guy's a smart guy.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, Megan, so we're going to wrap this up, but
Sure.
for you, like you got to ask these guys questions. You're putting the festival together. You've listened to them talk. What do you want to know more about?
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you said you're going to expand acreage, are you going to experiment with more varieties? Are you going to stay consistent with your production? What's that look like for you?
Well, for me personally, it's been, I've grown on 2 acres, 5 or 6 varieties. So it's kind of a bunch of varieties, but a little bit of each. Yeah. So one of the things that we've kind of come to in the state as growers and with Hop Growers of New York is that it's better to be a master of few than grow a lot and not do it well, or just have too much to handle. So I think a little bit to what Jimmy mentioned earlier about like being a large farm or a small farm, it's kind of all relative. So I think a hop farm of my size, if I could grow 3 or 4 varieties on increased acreage very well, that would be better than growing more acreage and more varieties at the same time. So that's the direction we're heading in for sure.
And Megan, for Adam, and I'm sure he's got questions that you have to ask him anyways about the festival. You can do it on air.
Oh, man.
Is he going to show up?
He better show up. I think even when we were at one point, we were talking about the following weekend, and he was even saying, he's like, I will fly down same night or something like that, and then be there in Buffalo, be there. So, I think that it would be hard to keep him away from this festival. That's for sure. So I'd be very surprised if he was not there. What question do I have?
Well, you're working on the festival with him.
I know.
A question you asked him maybe early on in the process.
I mean, things have gone very, very smoothly with Torch and Crown and the whole operation. There's been a lot of synergy in our communication. I think that we all jumped on to the vision really well together. You all communicate wonderfully. And that's really my only, if I had a demand at the beginning, that was the only demand, was that we could talk to each other when we needed to.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I feel like he pitched it and we just kind of said yes. And then I mostly asked questions about the hop industry at large, because I realized what a wealth of knowledge he had, as a specialist in this industry for so long. So I was like, cool, let's do the festival. Actually, can you help me with this, and this, with everything?
Let's get one of the questions you might have asked him way back when.
About the festival or
anything
generally?
About hop industry.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of going to his point there, like just some of the stuff we're seeing. I know it was a little surprise to you, but like everything, out west, we're contracting a lot less. So it was just talking about how to engage with suppliers, because we're just seeing a very different, relationship. Like even when, with those contracts that we had, sometimes they'd start as soon as like January, February of the year leading up, being like, hey, can you dial this in? Hey, this is under where you were last year. Can we increase it? And then I think this year, because everyone knew it was a really tough year and it was going to be hard to really commit, it's just people weren't really reaching out until like a month or two ago to be like, hey, how's it going? And I think it's very much that on the sales side of things, they've really pulled back in terms of the number of sales reps out there. And they're probably just really focused on committing to those 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 clients and really focusing in on them and making sure that they're supplying for those. And just kind of like us, we're allowed like skating under a little bit and more just focusing on contracting just things we can do selection on. And then just kind of going to the market, for anything else we need, which also, gives us a little bit more opportunity to kind of stay local and see what else is out there, because we have a lot more flexibility than we've had previously because of the fact that the market, obviously outside of New York State, to Adam's point, is in a, frankly, in very bad place, and they're pulling back so much acreage because there is such a big oversupply.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I know there's a lot going on in this room.
Lots going on.
Final comments before we close out?
Nothing but appreciation and thanks for you, for all, the board and the members of Hop Growers in New York, and for Torch and Crown and our, Rusty Nickel and Indian Ladder Farms and all the other.
Adam, who has the best job in New York?
I think it's the host of Beer Sessions Radio on the Heritage Radio Network.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think your job fits you, man. I want to, John, give him a shout out, because I can't believe he went from a GoFundMe to buy a used hop harvesting machine. You guys are now dealing with...
and then you had a bunch of hop farmers trying to agree on something. And, farmers tend to be an independent crowd, so it's hard to agree on anything. But the one thing we did agree on was hiring Adam. And he's been doing
Here's one. Small farm. I graze my cattle, and there's hops in the way. Yeah. You get stories like that?
Yeah, exactly, Jimmy. But he's been doing a great job. And one thing I can say is all the members of Hop Growers of New York are very, very proud of him, and, really appreciate. He lives it, sleeps it, drinks it, eats it, and he's just been doing a heck of a job for us. And, we're really hopeful to continue to take it to that next level. And we see that happening now, which is what's so exciting, Jimmy.
Let's hit it one more time. Megan, when's the first Wet Hop Fest and where?
September 22nd at Torch and Crown Brewing Company in Union Square.
Manhattan, New York City.
Manhattan.
And then where's the second one?
Rusty Nickel Brewing in Buffalo on September 28th. That's a Saturday.
And where's the third one?
Third one is at Indian Ladder Farms, October 5th, and that's the grand finale. We're excited to get up there.
Altamont, New York, just north of Albany.
We're going to be awarding the Glass Hop to the best wet hop beer in the state that day.
We're going to keep talking hops this fall. We did a lot of craft malt the last few years, and I think it's time to talk more about hops. And John, thanks again for calling me and reaching out. And big shout out to our great new head engineer at Heritage Radio Network, Mr. Gabriel. Thank you so much for having us. And Adam, John, and Megan, you guys made my day. Thank you so much. We've been drinking some beers featuring certain hops with, what's the brewery called? Nightglow.
Nightglow, and we appreciate you, Jimmy.
We're going to hang out here at Roberta's Pizza in Bushwick, and we're going to celebrate the night. So thanks so much, guys. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Thank you, guys. Woo!
Thank you.
Thanks.
Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.